did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Hello and welcome to a BFI podcast mini-sode. This time, head turned by Hollywood, we're throwing the usual format to the wind and presenting a straight-up interview with two glitzy A-listers, James and Dave Franco. James is the actor / author / lecturer / soap star / installation artist / painter / producer / columnist and star of good stuff like Freaks and Geeks, 127 Hours and Spring Breakers, and bad stuff like Spider-Man 3, Eat, Pray, Love and Spring Breakers. Dave is an actor. The pair dropped into the BFI South Bank last week to talk about The Disaster Artist, James's biopic about the making of a film many have called the worst movie ever made, The Room.
I used to know a girl. She had a dozen guys. One of them found out about it, beat her up so bad she ended up in a hospital on Guerrero Street.
What a story, Mark.
Yeah, you can say that again.
Where to start with The Room? Released in 2003, it was the self-funded passion project of writer-director Tommy Wiseau. His debut film, The Room, roughly tells the story of Johnny, played by Wiseau, a successful banker whose future wife, Lisa, is cheating on him with his best friend, Mark. Mark is played by Greg Sestero, Tommy's friend, and the co-author of the book, The Disaster Artist, My Life Inside the Room, the greatest bad film ever made, on which Franco's film is based. Self-distributed by Wiseau and a bomb on its initial release, The Room has amassed a cult following since. It sells out midnight screenings to fans who've repurposed Wiseau's utterly odd and very bad melodrama as an ironic comedy. Wiseau, a terrible filmmaker but a great showman, has gone along with it, appearing at the screenings to play up the myth that this was what he intended all along. People find The Room hilarious, but honestly I just find it strange. It's not just poorly made, it doesn't make any sense. It's been described as a film that feels like it was made by aliens. Every part of it, the script, the acting, the editing, is off. Anyway, James Franco loves it, and he's made a surprisingly tender tribute to The Room in the form of The Disaster Artist. Here's Franco and his brother talking about how to make good art out of bad. By the way, they don't identify themselves, but Dave is the shouty one, James is the really shouty one.
If we think about the history of films, there are thousands upon thousands of bad movies that we will just never watch again. And then there's this small circle of bad films that have become cult hits for whatever reason. And then I think within that circle, there's The Room. And the thing that I think sets The Room apart is the passion with which Tommy Wiseau originally, made it. That he did not intend it to be, farcical in any way. That this was a very earnest, sincere expression of his own trials in life, his feelings about how he had been betrayed by the world. I think it was his attempt to show people, who he was. And then, in addition to that, he just had a very skewed perspective of who he was.
How old are you?
Oh, wow, Greg age.
You're 19? Yeah. I just turned 14.
Wow, happy birthday.
The three mysteries of Tommy are, how old he is. He was at least in his late 40s when he made The Room, and he claimed he was in his 20s. He sound like this, which would suggest he maybe is from Eastern Europe, but he claimed he's from New Orleans, and he all-American guy. And where he got the money, because he self-financed The Room at the tune of $6 million. And so he just seemed to have such a lack of perspective on himself, but he swung so big. He did not make the movie that he intended, which, the poster said it all. On the original poster, he said, he wrote the copy. It said, a Tennessee Williams level drama, And, so he intended to make Streetcar Named Desire, and then he realized that everybody was laughing at it. And so he did this weird flip and did some strange mental gymnastics so that he then took credit for it being a comedy, but he can still at the same time believe he's greatest director around. And so he just added to the poster. He didn't take off Tennessee Williams level drama from the poster. He just added something like entertaining black comedy. And so now he says about The Room, you know, The Room is a safe place. You can laugh, you can cry, do whatever you like, express yourself, just don't hurt yourself, right? And so now he's just, you know, expanded into an even stranger character that can encompass, you know, this belief that he's, you know, a director on the level of, you know, Elia Kazan, but also intended to make a comedy. So how you explain that, I don't know.
That kind of deftness, though, means that he's something of a great Hollywood player, right? Like, if he's managed to turn his flaws into a strength.
I mean, it's like he made something that people are playing in theaters 15 years after the fact, and there's something to be said about that. And I know now he says that he made something that makes people feel something, and that is impressive in its own right. And I guess it's just like something that we could really relate to. Is their struggle, is Tommy and Greg's struggle, where from the outside they seem like these weird outsiders, but when you boil it down, like they were young actors trying to make it in this very difficult business, and we've both been there. And I've been on sets where I thought everything was going great, and people on set were talking about awards for the movie that we were working on, and I bought into the hype, and then it came out and it was awful. It was the worst thing I've ever worked on. And so it's one of those things that you just, as an artist, you are on set and you're putting everything you have into something, but you don't know which way it's going to go. And that causes you to have these moments where you think, is what I'm doing any good, or is this a total mess? And you just kind of have to put your head down and do your best work and hope for the best. And we should add that on its initial run, Tommy, being the distributor as well, kept the movie in the theaters for 2.5 weeks, even though nobody was coming. It cost $6 million, made $1,800 its first run. He kept it in the theaters for 2 weeks to qualify for the Academy Awards.
How did it do?
It did not get nominated.
We do alley scene.
This set of the alleyway looks exactly like the real alleyway out there.
That's right. That's why we're doing Hollywood movie, right?
Well, why don't we just shoot in the real alleyway?
Because it's a real Hollywood movie.
No, yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
James, I wondered if there's something about this story that could be the James Franco story as well, and that's why you relate to it so hard.
So you're smiling for the listeners. Let's just say you're smiling when you say that, but in fact, it is a very personal story to me. I've been introducing. We just did our U.S. premiere at the Mann's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, which is sort of this iconic theater in the center of Hollywood on Hollywood Boulevard, and all the handprints and the Hollywood, Walk of Fame stars are out in front and everything. And I introduced the movie by saying, this in fact is a very personal story to me. And Tommy introduced The Room on the night of his premiere by saying, this my movie, this my life, be cool. And that's how I feel, because, like my brother was saying, I could relate to the struggle. Anybody that comes to Hollywood has to do a first movie. You have to break in to a certain extent. And most people have to struggle, as did I. I went, and then I realized, oh, wow. Even when we were location scouting, wow, I'm choosing all these locations that I used to frequent when I was up and coming. All these Ernie's Taco House and Baja Fresh, and all these small acting schools in the San Fernando Valley, and it started. And then in addition to that, I realized when I first read the book, I relate to Tommy. Like you see a character, and sometimes you just know, like. Maybe on the surface, he's very far from me, but underneath, there's something I really understand. We had the same heroes. His hero is James Dean. I played James Dean. He quotes James Dean's film, Rebel Without a Cause, in his movie, The Room. You're tearing me apart, Lisa. That's straight from Rebel Without a Cause. And also the idea of hearing no, like... look, I'm so grateful. I did have a career. I got to be on, Freaks and Geeks at a pretty young age with Judd Apatow and Seth Rogen, people that I've been working with for years and years now. I was very fortunate in that sense. But there were other times when I had movies and subject matter that I wanted to put across that most people were like, I don't know, James, like, you're on your own with that one. Like, a movie called Child of God that was an adaptation of Cormac McCarthy's novel about a murdering necrophiliac. Like, most people were like, James, this maybe isn't going to get a big audience. And I was like, I know, but I want to make this. I need to make this. And I think that was largely financed by me, and very much in the vein of Tommy and his movie. And so I could really relate on a lot of levels to Tommy and just the idea of wanting to be creative. By playing Tommy, I realized some of how willful I could be in my own career and life, and to sort of step back and just be a collaborator. And so the movie taught me a lot of things just by who I was working with, my brother and Seth Rogen and friends, but also playing a guy that I related to in more ways than I had liked to admit or look at before.
How much is the film a fuck you to critics and to the idea that something's critically good?
What do you mean exactly? I don't quite understand the question.
It feels like it crosses the line. The Disaster Artist, the film, makes a good film out of a bad one, but it kind of muddies the line about what a so-called good film is, right? And a lot of film critics will tell you that The Room is a terrible film that has no artistic worth, but you guys have made something good out of it.
I really don't think it's a fuck you at all.
Yeah.
Our approach was always one of love, and so there was very little sort of defiance in the DNA of this thing, and from the beginning we knew the hook would be to make a very optimistic, hopeful, earnest film. Like my earlier films were never fuck yous, but they were in some ways defiant. Like, you can't make don't make a film about, it's a Faulkner adaptation or whatever. Oh yeah? Well, I'm going to do it anyway. Like with this film, it was like, no, how do we bring people into this story? How do we make this story universal and relatable? And so that started with bringing on Seth Rogen, and then going to the writers, Neustadter and Weber, who had done 500 Days of Summer and Fault in Our Stars, because they were so good at relationships and stories. And so our approach was always, how do we bring people in rather than how do we not how do we stick it to anybody?
Yeah, Neustadter and Weber are maybe not the most obvious choice for a movie like this, because I think most people would want to hire big comedy writers, and that's just not who they are. Like my brother said, they thrive on relationship stories, and so that just kind of shows you where our head was at, where we always knew the movie would have humor, but we looked at movies like Boogie Nights in terms of tones that we were going to try to mimic, where in Boogie Nights it's a bunch of strange characters in bizarre scenarios, but everyone is playing it as real as possible and letting the humor come from that as opposed to telling jokes. And so that, I think, allows there to be a lot more heart without shoving it down the audience's throat. It's like when you have a big comedy where it's joke, it's hard to like seamlessly wedge in heart without making it feel out of left field.
Hope your eardrums are still intact. The Disaster Artist, starring the Francos, Seth Rogen and Alison Brie, is released in the UK today. This episode of the BFI podcast was presented and produced by me, Henry Barnes. You can find me on Twitter at Henry H. Barnes. Subscribe to the BFI podcast via iTunes and check out our SoundCloud page. Thanks for listening. See you next time.